So today on our panel, we have Aziza, Professor Kara Pham, and VP Jennifer Fondiller. And they'll all introduce themselves to you all.
All right, I'll start. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jennifer Fondiller. I'm the Vice President for Enrollment here at Barnard. So I work very closely with the Admissions Office and the Financial Aid Office for students who are interested in applying to the college. And I also work very closely with our Pre-College Programs Office. I also wanted to share that I'm a Barnard alumna myself. So I graduated Barnard College, and I did a lot of science when I was here. So I think I'm a really perfect example of sort of what you study does not determine and dictate what you end up doing for different sorts of careers. So I sort of combined science with liberal arts, and then many, many years later have ended up back in a college, but working in this area. So welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Kara Pham. I'm a faculty member here at Barnard College in the neuroscience program as well as in the psychology department. I did not go to Barnard. I'm a California person, so I grew up in California and went to college there, but happily ended up in New York City, and I've been working with Barnard students for about 12 years now.
Hi, my name is Aziza Shiambola. I am from the Bronx, originally Nigeria. I'm currently a senior at Barnard. I study neuroscience and behavior. And my favorite thing about Barnard is the care that the professors have to actually making sure you succeed within their course, and also like maintaining connections with them after you take a course with them.
So thank you all for joining us on a Saturday. So we'll start with asking some questions, and then our panel will go through with answering them, and then, as I mentioned, we'll move into our Q&A. Sound good? Yeah, okay. So what are some things that you would say helps lay the foundation for a student applying to college and in the STEM field?
Disclaimer, I didn't enter college as a STEM student, so I wouldn't really know the work beforehand, but I think it's similar to the same, like knowing that when you're coming, you don't necessarily, as much as you think like, oh, I'm doing biology, I'm doing chemistry, whatever you're working towards like within your high school state now, it's okay to like change that once you get here. Yeah.
I would also argue that you have a limited exposure to coursework in sciences when you're in high school, and I know that there are a lot of diversities of high schools, and so sometimes you might not know what is available until you arrive on a campus. So having that open mind and being able to try to sample a lot of different things will give you that exposure.
And this kind of program is the perfect way to even start that, right? When you're in high school, that you're looking for opportunities. I know one student, I was speaking to a father earlier today, who said that his daughter found out about this program just by a Google search, right? It was just looking for interesting things that were related to this interest she had in science, and so came upon this kind of program. Keep looking for those kinds of opportunities if you think that science is something that you're really interested in. I would also say, coming from an admissions perspective, that you want to prepare yourself as much as you can in high school for the rigors of when you get to college. So that in high school you want to have a good foundation of science, right? So that you want to take those hard science classes. If your schools offer honors classes, or maybe you're in an AP or an IB curriculum, you want to push yourself and take those classes, because they are going to prepare you for places like Barnard, which are hard, as our student here will tell you, but not so hard that you can't do it. And so just try to push yourself and lay that foundation in high school so you're prepared.
So our next question is, if you have an interest in a range of disciplines, how do you choose a major?
I think you start off by, like, your first year is a great time to like kind of explore the courses, plus the way that I was on the 9 ways of knowing, the way that it's set up, you kind of take different classes within different subjects. So if you're a person who started off taking your 9 ways of knowing classes now, which is now foundations for you guys, you would kind of know what you want to dabble in. And I know for me, being that I didn't necessarily come in as STEM, I took intro bio for non STEM students my first semester here, and then after taking that, I kind of went into diving into like the major of neuroscience and behavior, which is kind of an interdisciplinary of biology and psychology. So I didn't have to, if I thought I wasn't able to do biology, I didn't have to do too much bio, and also like an interest within psychology. So there are some courses where you're not strictly doing a specific, certain majors where you're not doing a specific coursework, you kind of still within them get to taste from different departments, such as like with neuroscience, you take chem classes, you take bio classes, and you take, well, I take physics because I'm pre-med, and you also get to take psychology classes. So within that, I get a lot of taste of different STEM fields classes.
Yeah, I think just the nature of the general education foundations will force you to have to select classes from different disciplines, and that's a great way to choose those classes wisely based upon what you think you might be curious about. And I would say that that's certainly relevant for the first couple of years while you're still a pre-major. But I have a really interesting story. When I started graduate school, I met another student who was in my graduate school program, and she was a student at Barnard, and I was in a PhD program for neuroscience, but she was a history major at Barnard, and she had a very interesting story because she was under the 9 ways. This was a while ago, but she said that as a history major, she had to take a full year of science with labs at Barnard. She was so frightened of this experience that she put it off and put it off and put it off until her senior year. She signed up for intro bio just as a requirement that she had to do, but loved the class so much that she decided to change everything. She still graduated from Barnard as a history major because by then she was a senior and well on her way to fulfilling that. But then afterwards she decided, oh, maybe I'll try working in a biotech company and getting more research experience, and realized that she did have a sincere curiosity for biology, and that's how I met her in graduate school. So I think certainly having those foundations requirements really does force you to do some things that maybe sometimes you wouldn't necessarily volunteer to do. But I think as long as you are sincerely picking the classes that you have some sort of interest in and approaching them with an open mind, then it's always an opportunity to figure something out.
So I want to let's see a show of hands. For how many of you are people starting to ask, what do you want to major in? Raise your hands. So almost everybody here, right? So they're all asking you to focus right now. What do you think you want to do? And what's so hard is that when you get to college, at a place like Barnard, we have over 50 majors in areas you've never even studied before. So how would you even know what you want to do, right? You might have ideas, but don't feel that pressure that you have to know exactly what you want to do. When students come to a place like Barnard, they don't officially declare their major until the end of their second year. So there's many students that come in and they have an idea, so they might start taking a class or two in that area, but many don't have an idea, and so that's why these foundation classes and general education requirements are so good, because you have the flexibility to try out different kinds of classes. And then by the end of your second year, you go to a particular office, or first you meet with your advisor and you talk it through with your advisor. And once you decide to select, you go to a particular office to actually officially declare that. Then they give you a button that says declared. So it feels it's a really good, right? Good feel-good moment where you've really known that you've now made that decision in a particular area, but not feeling like you have to do that and know everything now.
Yeah. So some of our panelists hinted at the nine ways of knowing, which we now refer to as the first year experience. And so I'd like you guys to talk with our students more about what that is and what that means and how that makes the Barnard difference between here and Columbia, right?
So our curriculum, so you've heard a couple of terms. One are general education requirements, and then you heard this phrase, the 9 ways of knowing. So our general education requirements used to be called the 9 ways of knowing. And your class is the last class to go under that model. So we have a new model that we follow now, which I think has the same sort of broad sense to it, and then has another interesting layer to the kinds of classes that you will take here. And so I don't know how familiar you are and want to describe a little bit of that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, our general education requirement is now called Foundations. And so there are certain disciplines that students have to fulfill. Every student will fulfill the first year Foundations with a seminar class and an English class, foreign language, science, humanities, social sciences. But within those categories, there are certain other layers of requirements, such as making sure that you fulfill a technology requirement, making sure that you fulfill, I guess I mentioned science labs already.
Another course to do with New York City.
All right, that's right, a local requirement, so making sure that you take one class that deals with New York City, as well as a global requirement, making sure that you take a class that deals with worldwide issues. So it's just really a wonderful array of classes, and it's, for the most part, I think pretty flexible because there are so many different classes that you can choose from to satisfy each of these requirements.
Right. There's one, so the class that's the local requirement, for example. So you could take an environmental science class, and as part of the class, the professor is taking you out onto the Hudson River here locally, and you're doing some research there. Well, now you're doing something in New York City, and that's that local requirement. For another class, it could be that you're taking an art history class, and it's maybe focusing on the architecture of New York City. So a totally different kind of class, but it's getting you familiar and connected with what's happening in the community around us, but in different sorts of disciplines. So that's a really interesting way to kind of think about a curriculum, but also connecting you with the world around you.
I'm just curious, how many of you here are actually living in New York City right now?
Good amount.
Oh, maybe half.
Yeah.
I would say I grew up in California, and so I don't know that I truly appreciated the advantages and the resources that New York City had to offer until I came here, and not when I came here for the first time as a graduate student, but when I came here to the Barnard campus and saw what was possible for our students. And that is just something to be, I think I am still in awe of the fact that our students, certainly our students in the sciences who are conducting research, may be working directly under the mentorship of a Barnard faculty member, but they are not required to. So they may work with Columbia faculty either across the street or uptown at the medical school, or they may be working in labs that are located at NYU downtown or across town at Mount Sinai or Rockefeller University. And that's not just restricted to our science students, but students who are in, say, journalism or media or business or any other discipline who have this tremendous resource of the city and the types of real-world experiences that they can capture during their time here. I think I've only managed to appreciate since being here.
So, how many of you have started your college search process, understanding what it means to apply to college, the different types of colleges? So, we are a liberal arts college. Is everyone familiar with what a liberal arts college is? Yeah? Raise your hand. Yes? No? Got it. Okay, and so we're a liberal arts college that has a strong partnership with a larger research university. So some of the questions that you guys may be asking yourself as you curate your list of colleges that you'd like to apply to: how do I choose between a liberal arts college and a research university? So we'd like to talk a little bit with you guys about the differences between the two, and I think this would be more suited towards Kara and probably Jennifer. And then Aziza will talk to us a little bit about what it means to be a student who gets the experience of having a liberal arts college and a research university. But how do you decide between the two, right?
Okay, so I'll start a little bit. So when you look up the term liberal arts, I think that there's two aspects that are going to come up. One of the aspects are that liberal arts colleges tend to be small, right? And so you've now been on this campus for a little bit, right? You looked around, this is the campus, right? It's not a very big campus where you're walking miles and miles in each direction. That we're a small community here. We have about 2,600 students here at Barnard. And what you get with a smaller campus are easier access to faculty, right? There's not a level of bureaucracy like there are at some bigger places. That opportunities seem to appear more easily, whether you're working with a career office or you're trying to seek out an advisor. How many of you now go to a school where your graduating class is under 100 students? Okay. How about 100 to 200 students? Okay. And over 200 students, right? So it's a real big mix that we have in the room here. Those that are at these really small schools, you know what it's like to be in a very, very small kind of environment. We're not that small because sometimes that can be a little too small after a while. So we're big enough that you have lots of opportunities, but small enough that you can make really, really good connections. The other piece of the idea behind liberal arts is exactly what we were talking about before with general education requirements, where we want to expose you to lots of different areas, and we're not just pigeonholed into one particular, couple of particular subject areas. And this doesn't mean that doesn't happen at larger universities, right? And many large universities, they're following a liberal arts curricular approach. But in combination with us being small, that's what you generally referred to as a liberal arts college.
Right, and I should add that the liberal arts really refers to the combination of both the sciences and the humanities. So the fact that the term arts is in there doesn't necessarily restrict any liberal arts education to just an education of exposure to the humanities and the social sciences, but it does include the math, the engineering, and the natural sciences as well. I would say that from a faculty perspective, I think the biggest difference between being at a liberal arts college and a big research university has to do with the fact that we have no graduate students here at Barnard College. So what that means in terms of my practice as a faculty member is that if I am going to hire somebody to work as a teaching assistant for me, I am hiring a Barnard undergrad and not a graduate student TA. If I need someone to help me with research or data analysis, I am going to Barnard students. So the Barnard students are my access pool of people who will be helping me carry out my tasks in a way that is very different from a research university. So I went to the University of California, which is a very large public university. When I decided that I actually really loved my science classes, I approached my faculty member and said, I would really love to help you run your lab. Can I work as a TA? And he said, no, all of our TA positions are reserved for the graduate students because that's part of the mechanism for how we fund graduate students is that they have to be on these TA or these RA assistantships. So unfortunately, undergraduate students were completely blocked out from working as TAs. That doesn't happen at a place like Barnard, right? Barnard faculty rely on Barnard students because we don't have graduate students. So what that means is that if you are hoping to get some level of depth out of your experience during your undergraduate years, you're not competing with older, more experienced graduate students here. So that gives you a really, really fulfilling experience.
I think, Kara, you did a wonderful job of hinting at the relationship between advisor and student and what can come out of that relationship of having these TAs in the classroom. Can we talk a little bit about tips to optimize the relationship between the advisor and the student?
So I guess my advisees are technically mandated to meet with me at least 4 times a year, twice a semester, and that is to help plan their course schedule. I'm pretty available to my advisees, so I say, yes, you have to meet with me 4 times a year, but if you want to talk to me about anything else, they know exactly when my student hours are, where my office is located, and how to contact me. And I have some students who come by pretty routinely, and I have some students who come by only those 4 times a year. That's a very individual process. I think what I have come to appreciate is the diversity of our students who arrive here on campus. Those of you who are currently at small schools who have the availability to your faculty at your high school through office hours or advising sessions might be accustomed to this type of model. So those students may feel very comfortable and they may arrive saying, oh, this is great, I'm so happy to meet you. I had a really close relationship with my advisor in high school, so I'm hoping to continue that. And others come in saying, oh, you know, I never had to meet with an advisor or a counselor when I was in high school, and I can totally forge my way through, and perhaps they can, but perhaps they can benefit with closer interactions with either me as an advisor or their other faculty members. So sometimes we have to encourage students to come see us. I found that's as friendly as I try to be, that regardless, some students can find faculty to be intimidating, and we try to, I don't know how successful we are at this, but we do try to make ourselves available and to work with students at the level that they need. You know, and whether that is advising about course selection or about summer internships or the types of things that you would need to do to prepare for a career after Barnard, or even just having someone to talk to about, you know, why your roommate isn't washing dishes in the dorm room, for example. I hear all sorts of things, and I think that's really up to the level of the student and how comfortable they feel with their faculty. But I should stress, actually, that your advisor is a tremendous source of information for all sorts of things. So some of our students come in, you know, the fact that you're here today means that you've taken some initiative to look into what types of extracurricular academic programs are available, but not everybody does that. And that's true at the college level as well. So some of our students come in and they say, oh, you know, I know that after college I want to do A, B, and C, so that means that for this summer I want to do this. That's great, but not everybody knows that. Right? So sometimes just speaking to your advisor and having your advisor suggest, for example, oh, if you're interested in this summer program, you might want to start looking here, and for funding opportunities and application deadlines are here. So that's where your advisor can be really, really helpful.
Yeah. Thank you, Kara. So in that same vein again, how would you all describe something like what we're doing this Saturday or any other extracurriculars that you may participate in on your college application? How would you say students should highlight that? That's that to Jennifer.
Well, I actually want to start with our student here and thinking about, like, when you were applying to college, if you remember that process, right?
I try not.
And you had to fill out an application. Was it hard for you, like, had you ever written a resume before, or was it hard for you to capture how you spent your time outside of school on your application?
So I went to a really small high school in the Bronx. So I didn't know about this until I started working for the PCP office my first year, and if I would have known about it, it would have been something that I would have came to. And in regards to knowing how to shape my resume, luckily, even though the school was really small, we had this one really great program that offered us internships during the summer where they kind of helped us with career development. So I had been able to write a resume before, but I know other students within my high school, they didn't have that opportunity because if you didn't do the program. So I figured it would have been hard if I hadn't had that experience already. And I would have definitely put this kind of experience on it since it's related, knowing if I would have gone into college as a STEM student, I would have highlighted that I'd done things outside of the curriculum at school to get my exposure to the STEM field.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think that, as you pick and choose things that you're interested in spending time with outside of the classroom, sometimes people push you to say, oh, you should do this, right? Or this would look really good on a college application. I want you to do things that you love and things that you enjoy doing. And I bet every one of you is here today because you really are interested, in what was being taught here today. And somebody just didn't say you should do this, and so that's why you're here. Maybe they said that, but I think that you also really wanted to be here. And that says something, first of all, but also when you start to think about that college process, to remember all these small things that you did, because on the college application it says, what do you do outside of the classroom? And so you immediately think to what, if I play a sport or I'm in a club in school, but you forget all these smaller things that you do that might have only been a one-day thing, or maybe it was a 2-week thing in the summer. But put all of those things on your application because it's the accumulation, right? It's the addition of all of these things that will help us to understand who you are and what you're interested in. It's also the case that many colleges have particular programs. So at Barnard, when students apply, we have several science programs that students can be considered for. Some of the programs they can apply to at the time they're applying to Barnard, but others they wouldn't necessarily even know about, or they might have missed it as they were looking at Barnard. But if I see on your application that you've done this summer program, or maybe you've done an after-school program that has to do with science, or you did this kind of program, then that clues me into knowing that you might be interested in science, and then I might consider for you for this special kind of program that we have. So you're going to look for these kinds of programs when you're applying, but always put down all the different things that you're involved in, whether it's science related, or maybe it's that you do some service project, and it might be a one-time service project, or it could be something that you do, every couple of weekends, or you do as part of school. But don't think that because it was a one-day thing, that you shouldn't put it down. You definitely should put down different things. Some of the smaller schools, you don't have a lot of sort of organized clubs in your school, and so you're always needing to find other things that you're excited about and to get involved in. Whereas some of the bigger, the larger schools have lots and lots of listed clubs. So it really varies from student to student, and we don't have an expectation of seeing one thing versus the other. The application process is for you to, the way I look at it is crafting your story. It's for us to help to understand who you are and what you love to do and why you think a particular college would be a good fit for you.
Yeah. And when talking about best fit, I think Jennifer and everyone on the panel would agree, it's really important to get to know the college that you're looking to apply to, because when you are crafting your application, you want yourself to speak to the college. Does that make sense? So let's talk a little bit about fit and finding best fit and how to know that a college is right for you to apply to. So.
Do you want to start?
Yeah, I think it is important, and outside of doing your research about the majors and stuff, probably also looking into the student life or student activities that are a part of the college that might be something you want to continue from what you do in high school. And I also think that if you're able to visiting those colleges that might seem as your top choices, because it's one thing to read about a college and actually be within the space of the college, and also kind of connecting with other students who attend the college currently, even though their experience might not be your exact experience, but it's kind of good to get some real life human interactions rather than just knowing all the stats about the college and saying, oh, well, I read this, I read that. Words are just words. They're not at all times you're how you would actually imagine things to be. And I also think being realistic with yourself in terms of other factors that goes into deciding what college you want to go to outside of the prestige and the academics of the college, such as distance and other things that might be good for you and yourself.
Yeah. I think it's definitely important to factor in how well you can tolerate being in an urban environment. I know it seems obvious because we're here in New York City, but I have had first-year students arrive on campus, I think a little shocked that it is so urban, and figuring out how to live here and adapt to that as a young 17, 18, or 19-year-old can be a challenge for some students. I think if you have the opportunity when you are visiting campuses to sit in on classes, that would be a really wonderful thing to get a sense of how large or how small or how interactive these types of environments can be. That can be really helpful.
Mm-hmm. And we have students here at Barnard from almost every state in the country, and something like 49 different countries they were just admitted from. So we have students that are coming from all over the world, but I think you're very much right in regards to a city environment. Even some of the students I was talking to today only come from maybe a half an hour away, and it's really pretty rural where they live, because in this area, you can go from being in the city of millions to a half an hour away, and being in a very rural, very wooded area. And that's in some ways really nice, right, that you can have kind of both of that. But when you get here, it's a different feel, and some of that feel is just the noises that you hear around you, right? There's constantly this buzz of noise around you. And some of it's the people around you, right? That there's lots and lots of people around. What you'll see when you visit this campus, though, is when you enter the gates of Barnard, to me, it seems like it slows down a little bit, right? So you have the city outside of the gates, but when you enter the gates, it's a little quieter. You wouldn't have known that unless you visited a place like Barnard. So as you start looking at colleges, and you think, do I want a city, don't I want a city? Go and visit some places that you wouldn't expect, or places you weren't thinking of visiting, because you might be really surprised what it feels like as you walk around and go to see places. I'm sure everybody is asking you, or starting to ask, the same kind of questions like the major: what kind of school do you want to go to, right? Do you want a big school, a small school, a school that's in a city, not in a city? And I'm sure for many of you, the answer is, I don't know. And that's okay, because you don't know until you just get out there and start to visit different kinds of places, so you can see, what does a school that's 2,600 people look like or feel like? And what does a school that's 10,000 students look and feel like?
So after you've applied and you've got into your dream school, what advice would you give somebody once they're on campus? What to ask for, what to look for?
Yes, so I came to the Admitted Students of Color weekend, and that was like the moment that I was like, oh, I want to go to Barnard. Like being able to interact with other students, and also like just, I guess, like as a high schooler, you're like, oh wow, like even though I live in the Bronx, it was still like Dean Hall Elementary, and it's a different experience. Once I entered the gates, I no longer felt like I was in the city, and just I remember when I came here, I went into a sociology class. Again, I wasn't a STEM person, and I enjoyed the professor, and I enjoyed like the content that was being taught, along with like interacting with the students, and also the person who was my host. Like, I really enjoyed like the post that I had, and also kind of like a reason why I came here as well. And just like whatever questions that you might have jotted down, like sometimes it might just like slip out of your head because you're like enjoying the moment, and you're this like high of like, wow, like I'm here, and sometimes it is as you expect it to be. It could be better, or it could not be the optimal. So just like if you do have specific questions that you wish to ask, don't only like speak with like representatives, speak with actual students who aren't working for representatives. Just like get whatever experience that you feel like might be more authentic for you.
So I think it's pretty intimidating sometimes to come onto a college campus. And I really applaud you all today. Some of you came with friends, but many of you came by yourselves. And that takes a lot of guts, right? To show up at something where you know nobody, you don't know the campus, and that you have to put yourself out there and you have to meet other people. And I'll tell you a funny story. I remember after we had an open house after students got admitted, and so a student comes onto campus, and I was listening, sort of overhearing a mother talking with her daughter, and the mother was saying, go up to the professor and say hello and ask questions. And the daughter looking back at the mother and saying, what am I gonna ask? Because sometimes you don't even know what to ask. And so at the beginning, like, that's okay. So initially, sometimes when you come onto a college campus, you don't want to ask any questions because you don't know what to ask, and it's really hard to put yourself out there. So sometimes it's just about observing. I do think it's nice after you take a tour, right? On the tour, we show you very general things, but then after a tour, next time you come back, if you say you're interested in psychology, sometimes go to the psychology department and just look at the flyers that are on the wall, because they can even give you a sense of what are internship opportunities, what are lectures that are happening, are there clubs, right? So lots of people will put posters up of things that are happening. So even before you start to talk to anybody, you can do a lot of observation. But then at a certain point, you do need to get the guts up to approach people and to think about questions that you might have. But if you don't have questions, it's okay, right? There shouldn't be this expectation that you know exactly what you can ask and want to ask. But so you'll build up to that after a little while, but that's okay.
So I think you've heard a lot of good things about the college application process. Once you get to college, we'd like to open the floor up for you all to ask some questions, if you have any, about applying to college, being at Barnard in New York City, anything that you'd like to ask at this time, feel more than free to step up to the mic and ask. If you have a question, we'd like you to come to the mic so everybody can hear it. And you guys can feel free to make a line if you'd like to, if that's easier for you. Yeah, right there.
So you talked about Students of Color Weekend. What was that like?
Oh, yes, TBT. It was a day just so like I came here for Admitted Students Weekend, and the Saturday was dedicated to like students of color. Then Sunday and Monday, like all the students who were admitted and went to that session was there as well. And I think it was really nice being that like this is a predominantly white institution, like being able to like see I say humans a lot, to see other people who like come from similar backgrounds, and knowing that even though this is a small campus, sometimes you can kind of like feel even smaller if you're a person who you're used to certain things, and then you come like to a place that's like foreign to you, and just like being able to interact with those like people who share similar backgrounds, and I guess also interacting with like the people who work here as well, and then like just knowing that there are people who actually are out here and like care for you as an individual and with the identities that you share as well. So I really enjoyed like being able to come to there, whereas like probably other Admitted Students Weekend are just like, oh, like everyone is there, and you kind of, it's easy for you to feel isolated. So it was kind of nice to like have that one day where you're interacting with people with similar backgrounds, and also getting to know others that Saturday and Sunday to kind of like put everything together.
That's great. Thanks.
No problem.
And if I just can add something, and you might want to comment on this as well, we do some events, and one of the events that we do as part of our Students of Color that weekend is that we invite alumni to come back to campus. And so we have a dinner during that weekend, and we do this throughout the year with all sorts of different groups of students, whether it's academic interests or other things, where we'll bring alumni back to speak with you and to connect with you and to sort of start to almost develop like mentor relationships. It's one of the beautiful things of being in New York City that a lot of our alumni do stay in this New York area, so we just have access to a lot of people. But I'm curious if you met alumni that night and what that experience was like hearing from alums.
I don't remember that much from that, but like I know that I also do like the reunion for Barnard. Like I work the reunion, and there are like events where alums of color and me as a student get to interact with those alums and interact with alums of color, and how eager they are to like talk to you and even like help you out. Like she mentioned, like some people stay within the city, so it's kind of nice like knowing that you can build those connections to people who can help you out while your time is here, versus like if they were like on the other side of somewhere else. So yeah.
Hi, how does it feel, or what does it mean to all of you to be at a women's college?
Sometimes sometimes I don't realize it. I don't know, maybe because like I'm not a part of like certain student groups that have that as a focus. But like sometimes I don't remember, because our classes are very integrated. At least like my STEM courses are very integrated with across the street. So sometimes you don't really know where someone goes to college unless you ask them. And like being within a women's college, I think one thing that I do appreciate from that is everyone like never feeling like I'm less than, in a sense, and always knowing that there are people who have it's a great support system of different people from different backgrounds. And even though it's a women's college, there are people who share other identities, like other gender identities, so it's not like always like identify, it is a women's college, but knowing that people share other identities that might not fall within like the binary stuff, and like getting to learn about that stuff as well, and being like learning I'm all over the place, like learning more about the different identities of the people who are around within the space with you. And I think it's a wonderful experience. I didn't initially know that's what I wanted for myself, but coming to Barnard, I know that this is like definitely the space that I wanted to be in for college.
I taught at Stanford before I came to Barnard. I'm teaching science classes as well, so those were predominantly co-ed classes. And I made a very interesting observation when I was teaching at Stanford, and that is if I were to give my students a written exam, say a midterm, everybody would do equally well regardless of sex. So it wasn't a situation where the women were scoring higher than the men or vice versa. Gender had nothing to do with their performance on the exam, but the difference really had to do with speaking up inside the classroom. And I would lead a lot of discussions that would require students to participate, and we would really very often settle into this pattern where the men in the class definitely felt more confident and more assertive in speaking up, and over a few weeks that had the tendency to kind of push the women in the class back so that they wouldn't speak. And I had to work really hard to try to pull the women out to speak, because I knew based on their other performance aspects that they understood the material and could just equally perform and give their opinions and analyze the process, but for whatever reason they were really unwilling to do so. Here at Barnard, I teach lab and lecture classes. My lab classes are Barnard students only, so I never have a Columbia student in my lab class. My lecture classes will have both Barnard and Columbia students, so that will be mixed gender. And I guess one aspect that I really enjoy is that there's still a diversity of students in my class. There will be some students who speak up more and others who tend to be more quiet. So even if you factor out the gender as a variable, you're still going to have a wide variety. But at least in this situation, I don't worry that if you're not speaking up, it's because you're somehow being out-dominated or performed by men in that type of context.
Yeah, well, and just to add to that, I hear too many times from high school students that when they've gotten to their junior or senior year and they have an interest in a STEM area, they are the only girl in that physics class or the only girl in that AP BC calculus class. And so they come to a place like Barnard, and it is incredibly refreshing that they really feel like they, just to see other young women who are really interested in this area, these areas, is very empowering to them in some ways. I will also say that being at a women's college, it's not something that you necessarily think about all the time, right? Yeah. That we're in a very singular environment here too, because we have this relationship with Columbia. So there's a lot that is very mixed with Columbia and very co-ed, but in the end, you always feel like you come back. I always call Barnard home base, right? That you always come back to Barnard at the end of the day, or maybe you're here like the whole day, but you always do feel like there is this like underlying support of helping women achieve in whatever they're going to do. We're here about science and STEM areas today, and that is a particular area where I do feel that women have been underrepresented. And so we're really helping and trying to help women push themselves in these kinds of areas. When you ask women to think about famous scientists, right? They don't generally first think about a female, and we want to flip that dynamic, and we want women to think about really strong females that are in various sorts of science areas and industry areas, and I think that pushes you at a place like Barnard.
Yeah, feel free.
Is it possible to fulfill two of the class requirements just with one class?
Oh, we were talking about the foundations, and so we talked about the foundations, which were those general education requirements, and then we talked about these other areas, right? The New York City local requirement and the global requirement. Those areas are called modes of thinking. And the answer is yes, you can fulfill both of those at the same time. So you don't feel like you have, we were listing off lots of requirements, but in fact, it's not as many as it sounded like, because you can combine them and fulfill them at the same time.
Have you ever faced any roadblocks or problems being a woman in STEM? Any of you? And if so, how did you handle that?
That's a good question. I think probably the greatest challenge was that during the course of my postdoctoral training, I started having children. And by nature, that kind of slowed me down. I took a few months off to be home with each of my children. And when that happens, the science marches forward, right? It can't stop if you're working in a lab and experiments have to be done and data collected and publications moved forward. Sometimes you do have to take a step back from that. I think overall, I've been generally really, really fortunate. I would say my whole lifetime, I've had incredible mentors. All the way I can reflect back all the way from elementary school through high school, through college and graduate school and my postdoctoral training, and currently my colleagues in my home department here, my faculty colleagues, everyone has been really, really supportive. And so I've been lucky that even though I chose to fulfill a career in science and also to have a family and have to take time off, that I was never prevented from coming back or never prevented from continuing. I can assure you that that's not the case for everybody. It is in science, and I'm sure you can attest to this, the relationship you have with your mentor when you're doing research is really the key thing. And so if you're lucky, you end up with a mentor who understands what your life processes are. And in unfortunate situations, you end up with a mentor who thinks, oh, well, you know, if you're thinking about something else, then maybe you're not so serious about your career. And I've had friends and colleagues go through the whole spectrum. And again, I think a big reason of why I'm here today is because I've had very supportive mentors who have enabled me to say, you know, when I go to one of my mentors and say, I'm pregnant, I'm going to have a baby at this time, for them to say, congratulations, that's wonderful, let's plan out what you're going to do for the next 6 months before you have the baby, let's think about what's going to happen when you're off and how you can re-enter. I think that's really, really great. So I know that in my department, a lot of my faculty colleagues have been very successful as science faculty and have balanced that work with a personal family life, whether that's children or other activities that they engage in. And Barnard has a really wonderful support system for the faculty and staff in that manner. I just can't really speak to what that experience would be like for everyone.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, as being a student, I haven't like gotten too far in my STEM career, but like being at Barnard, I think has really shaped me. Not me having like the confidence that I have in like sometimes losing the term of like a woman in STEM, because like the classes that we're taking, we're all competent of knowing how we're like doing and being confident in like the work that I can produce. That I guess like if I were to be out, like the moments that I have been out of Barnard and been do STEM, I don't really let that be a roadblocker for me, because I know my stuff and I sound as competent as anyone, whatever gender that be. So like Barnard puts a lot of stuff in you where like you don't doubt your ability, which I really appreciate, because I know it is difficult, like if you're a person who is in a co-ed setting all the time, like which the norm would be for the guy to be the one speaking up, and you kind of like lose yourself, whereas like at Barnard you're surrounded by like a group of strong people who, like regardless of what their background is, like they don't belittle someone else, so you kind of take that energy to wherever you go as well, that even if a person tries to approach you with that kind of stuff, you don't let it get to you, and you know how to like eloquently like speak out for yourself.
Speaking like in that type of area, I know that it's really important, like harmony and equality and support is just really important values of Barnard. And I remember on my tour here, the student that led it said that when she took classes at Columbia, she felt that there was a lot more competition. And I'm wondering, like she noticed it different in the classes, at least in that sense. And I'm just wondering how you prevent your collaboration with Columbia from running into the values or going against the values of Barnard.
Oh, that's right. So most of my classes have been, like, majority of my time at Barnard has been spent, like, physically at Barnard's campus. One, because, like, being, like, the STEM major with certain classes, once you start the sequence, like, at either campus, you kind of tend to continue it at a campus, and I've chosen to stick mine with at Barnard, because it's, even though the lectures are big, the lecture for certain STEM are big, they're not as big as across the street. Right now, my experience with taking a Columbia class is with physics, where I'm across the street taking that, and it is a bigger lecture class, but me being the person that I am, I love office hours, so I always go to office hours, and those office hours are more intimate because not many people come, so I've been able to interact with the professor more, and I don't think it's been I haven't noticed that energy for myself, because I guess it also depends on like the kind of people you're surrounding yourself with across the street, whether they imply that onto you. But I would say that it is very different here at Barnard, because there's not really, as much as we're all very committed into like trying to like outbeat ourselves, like being better than like myself, whatever course I took last time, it's not like I'm out to like get someone else, and like it's more of collaborative workspace while we're all succeeding individually.
Is that like generally, do most people take most of their classes in Barnard?
No, it's it's up to you. Like there's no
dependent on the
like
student.
formula to like taking like choosing what classes you want to take where, but it is for certain majors. Like if you were a chem major or physics major, like certain of those classes you might have to take specifically at Barnard. And then there's also some classes like for my class of animal behavior neuroscience department, I have to take it, or I have to take it at Barnard. So some classes you only have one options, whereas others like you can choose which one you want to where you want to take it, and that decision probably comes from looking up professors or like past students who've taken it, and you kind of get like their experience and choose which ones are out for you.
But in either place, you can find a way to make it work for you.
Yeah, you can with like, yeah, some people have taken their chemistry across the street, their physics across the street. I did mine differently, where I enjoyed my stuff at Barnard and then just went across to street for physics.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hello. Is there any distinct extracurricular activities that Barnard students participate in, or studying abroad programs, or any other internships, things that they do during the summer?
Oh gosh, all of those things. So how do our students spend time out of the classroom, sometimes connected with an academic interest area and sometimes not, right? So we have a student government, we have lots of theater and a cappella groups and dance, and we have cultural organizations, political groups, students who are doing lots of volunteer work, so those types of things. We also have organizations for students that are interested in particular academic areas, and students that might be interested in particular professions, right? So like a pre-med club that will bring in speakers and will serve as sort of like a little mini mentor group. So that's some things. And then I'll add one other thing, because you mentioned study abroad. So we do offer the opportunity for students to spend either a semester or a year outside of Barnard and to study either in another country, or some students might study at another school. And so we have a relationship with both Spelman College and Howard University, and also with a university in France, Sciences Po. And so students might be able to do an exchange program at those institutions as well.
It seems like a lot of our students do study abroad, at least one semester during their junior year. They're all over the world, in all sorts of countries and different programs. The vast majority of our students are able to take classes in these programs and bring those credits to transfer back into Barnard, and that's really great, particularly if they are pursuing classes that we don't necessarily offer at Barnard, so that's something that's very unique to that environment where they're going.
No, I didn't study abroad.
Thank you.
It was mentioned that Barnard students get the opportunity to do research with a mentor here. Are there any opportunities for high school students to do research with a Barnard faculty member or undergrad or graduate student at Columbia or Barnard?
It seems like most of the faculty are working with undergraduate students here at Barnard. Every now and then somebody might take in a high school student, although I think there's no dedicated program, as far as I'm aware, for placing high school students in Barnard labs. There are summer courses for high school students that are more instructional or seminar-like, but not necessarily a research experience in the lab. So I think, although I have heard of high school students being in labs, and so I think those are set up just more one-on-one with faculty members. If you find somebody who is conducting study in an area that you're interested in and you reach out to them and they happen to have the space and the resources to take on a high school student, that's definitely possible. I'm just not aware of a dedicated program.
Thank you.
Aside from like clubs and just going to school, what else can like a high school, like what else can we do on like a daily basis that can like prepare us for college and make us, I guess, like stand out a bit more?
That's a hard one, other than, you know, there's a huge spectrum of colleges and universities in this country, right? There's something like over 4,000 colleges and universities. And, you know, as you begin to look at different places, something different is going to appeal to students differently. And I think in the end, you can only be yourself, right? And so, but I do want you to wake up every day excited and be inspired about whatever it is that you are interested in, and you have to push yourself a little bit. I mean, I have 2 kids, and every time it came for summer, and they weren't planning and thinking and prepared, I had to push them a little bit because it wasn't an option for them to just sit around and do nothing, because I know they get really bored doing nothing. And so I had to push them a little bit. So that's one thing, is thinking about your summers in a very, I don't know, like in a proactive way. And it takes work. Some things don't fall into your lap all the time, right? You have to seek things out and try opportunities. And sometimes, there's a cost to things, and sometimes you have to be creative if you can't afford things, right? So to ask anybody you know if you have an interest in something, of ways that you can sort of find ways to participate in that particular thing. For many students, you would love to be able to do a particular program, but you have to have a job in the summer. And so when I'm reading applications, I'm not putting a judgment or a value on the things that you choose, right? So if one of you is able to go to camp in the summer and the other is working at Dunkin' Donuts, one is not better than the other. It's different choices that you make for different reasons. What is very important in your application is, how do you reflect on that? How do you talk about the things that you do and the choices that you've made? So you should be thinking about it in that way. When I'm ready to apply to college, I know I did certain things for certain reasons. Let me talk about those reasons, but not that one thing is better than the other. Don't ever think of it like that.
Thank you.
Obviously, being in New York City is an advantage. I just want to know how Barnard uses its programs and like classes, how you guys integrate that with New York City.
I think, again, as I mentioned for the sciences, the way we use the city is the fact that there are just a lot of universities and research spaces, a lot of faculty doing research all over the city, and we place our cities in all of these labs. We do so because we increasingly every year have more and more students who are interested in a depth of a research experience, and the nature of Barnard being a small liberal arts college means that we actually don't have enough faculty power to mentor every single student who wants to conduct research in our labs, just because of space and budget constraints. But we never say no to a student, and so we have a list of people at Rockefeller or Mount Sinai or NYU or Columbia Med who have taken Barnard students in the past, and we might call them up and say, oh, we have somebody who's interested in your area of study, are you willing to take a student? So helping to make that connection between these external labs and our students has been very helpful. Sometimes the other day I ran into a faculty member at Columbia Medical School, and she said, oh, I currently have a Barnard student, she's really great, I'm looking for another one. So a lot of contacts are made in that way.
Thank you.
Hello. I was wondering how in recent years Barnard's involvement in STEM has evolved and how it's continuing to develop now.
How it's evolved?
I'll start, and I'm sure others have things to add. I personally think that Barnard has always been extremely strong in STEM areas. I was here many, many years ago as a student and felt that I was incredibly supported. The students were doing research at that time, and I worked with a biology professor for 2 years, both during the year and then during the summer. And one way we have evolved is we have really hiked up our summer opportunities here on campus. So we have a program where students can stay here over the summer and do research and be funded for that. So they'll get paid, they are paid for the research that they do here over the summer, and that's called the SRI program. And so that's something that has just exploded and has really expanded here. And what was also really interesting when I was a student here doing research for my professor. So he had 3 students that he was that worked with him, and he went away on vacation for 2 weeks and left us in charge of the lab. And I just remember at the time that was this incredible responsibility that I was doing plant biology, right? I could not let the little plants die, right? And so and some of it was I learned it was very slow research, right? So it was really sort of this longer term piece to it. But that, I think, has just grown here in terms of the opportunities that students have in the science areas.
Yeah, the summer funding through the Summer Research Institute, SRI, has really just exploded in the past few years. We've always had students do research during the year and over the summer. I think the big difference is that, say, 5 years ago, if you were a student and you wanted to stay over the summer and have a full-time lab experience, that if you were lucky, you were working in a lab where the mentor had funding and could pay you, or maybe you got some sort of an external fellowship. So for example, through the Barnard Alumni Association, they will fund summer internships, but maybe you're working in a lab off campus and there's no funding and they expect you to volunteer. I tell my Barnard students, New York City is expensive. You should not expect to work for free once you're a college student. You are contributing valuable time and valuable skills to a project. There is some mechanism to make sure you get paid, and that was much more challenging 5 years ago. Now what has happened is that our provost office has made a dedicated effort to fund students. So if you are doing an internship even off campus and that faculty member has not set aside dedicated funds to pay what they would consider to be a summer volunteer, then Barnard will step up and say, we will pay and make sure that you have summer housing and that you get a stipend and you can live here.
Yeah. And I also wanted to add that we have recently developed with Columbia something called a 4+1 program in engineering. And so students who come to Barnard could major in whatever they want to major in here, but certainly take a lot of the hard science areas, and then they would spend 4 years here at Barnard and then move over to Columbia for a master's degree. So they're being admitted to that master's program while they're still here as a student. We also offer what's called a 3-2 engineering program, where that's 2 bachelor's degree, a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Science. So that's also a program with Columbia. But that 4+1 bachelor's master's program in engineering is another new program. So we're always looking for these opportunities to be able to kind of come back and think about students who are interested in STEM areas, but also the benefit of being in this liberal arts environment. How can you combine those two?
Thank you.
Hi, I had a question about the pre-college summer program. So how similar is the summer program to normal life at Barnard or a typical college experience?
So I think that what we try to do in the summertime is bring the college experience into the summer. And so you are living in the residence halls, or you're commuting as you would during the year. You're working with Barnard faculty. You're choosing your electives as you would if you were in college. No one's making that decision for you. You kind of have to learn how to manage your time outside of the classroom. It's really a simulation of what college life is going to be like. And the rigor it's not taking away because you are a high school student. It is still very much a college classroom. And so giving you guys the opportunity to come and preview college essentially for a summer, whether it's for 1 week, 2 weeks, or 4 weeks, you're here with us and learning what it means to be a college student so that you can build that confidence piece when you go into applying for college. You kind of know what it's already about.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Hi. I wanted to ask about the college admissions process. So you told us like what we could do to kind of like better ourselves and get ahead. What are some things that we definitely shouldn't do?
I'll say this one. From reading here at Barnard, but also reading in my past job, right? Recommendation letters. I always say I would have students, maybe their parents knew somebody famous and they'd have them write in, and you're like, there is no way you worked with them, you know? I think just being authentic. We read thousands, hundreds of thousands of applications, and we just, be considerate of the time that you give, don't oversubmit on recommendations. And also, make sure if you're asking somebody to write you a recommendation that they really know you and speak to the heart of you. Don't just get someone to write a recommendation letter because you like their title or their name. That's always like, I'm a stickler for that kind of thing.
Also, does Barnard have any like spring programs or internships of any sort regarding?
You said spring programs?
Yeah, like, or spring internships
For
humanities.
For high school students or
Yeah, for high school students. Like, are there any like internships, if I were just to speak to like a professor, do you think the possibility of me getting an internship, because like I'd be interested in that? And if
Right.
the
So we
professor
don't
was-
have, I mean, we don't have any formalized programs for high school students during the academic year. You know, we have this kind of program, so we do one-off programs right now. So there's no formalized kinds of programs. Every now and then, we do find that there's a student who might be doing some interesting research project in their school, and they come upon a Barnard faculty member who might be studying that area, and they've reached out to that person. And sometimes a faculty member is, Professor Pham was saying, might take on a student in the summer if they had space because there was some connection there that the student had from what they were working on. But generally, there's no formalized kind of program.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my question was, for any students interested in pursuing a medical profession, do they get specific advisors or any extra benefits that would help them like get all the coursework required?
Oh, that's a great question. Actually, I do medical school advising. So there, in terms of coursework, you're pre-med, so you know that there are certain coursework that would be required to apply to medical school in the sciences, in biology and chemistry and physics, et cetera. You can major in anything and apply to medical school. So for example, you don't have to major in biology or in chemistry. We've had students major in anthropology or in English, as long as you complete that science coursework and you take the medical school admissions exam. We have an office based in Beyond Barnard that does medical school advising specifically, and so during the early years, that might involve attending programs where you are meeting physicians and just getting a general overview of what you would need to do to apply to medical school. So in addition to your coursework, you would need clinical experience, whether that's interacting with patients or interacting with physicians, for example. But also, we coordinate all of the recommendation letters that you would submit. We conduct committee letter interviews so that we present every applicant from a college perspective, you know, just generalizing everything that you've done in your 4 years here. And this is available to every single Barnard student. So if you were, say, a senior and applying directly to medical school, we provide that. But if you've graduated from Barnard and 6 years later decide, oh, you know, I was a history major, but now I really want to become a physician, so I've since taken college science classes and taken the MCAT, you come back and we still guide you through that whole process, from mock interviews to looking over your resume and everything else. And I would say that that applies not just for medical school, but it applies to almost everything that our students can seek. So even applications to Fulbright programs or the Luce programs, a lot of different fellowships, law school, graduate school, veterinary school, we're guiding our students through the whole way.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, you guys are asking really great questions. We wanted to do some wrap-up, so I'll take one more question, and then any questions that you may have, I'll be floating around. You can ask me before we go to your next session, or anyone who's on the panel. I think you guys are asking such great, thoughtful questions, so I think we're on this side now. Right.
She can go. She was waiting.
Okay.
For us. You sure? Hi, my name's Hayla. I was wondering about, does like Barnard help with students find jobs like after they graduate, like holding maybe job, like sort of festivals kind of thing?
Definitely, absolutely, right? But we certainly want our students after they graduate from here to find great jobs. And it doesn't just end right in your senior year, that we're going to really connect with you forever. Because we know the first job you have outside of college is not going to be the last job that you have. But we do hold in this very room more than once a year what we call job fairs, right? So how many of you have ever been to a college fair? Right. So they do the same thing for jobs. So they'll have many, many employers come in lots of different industries for a job fair, and students will come and they'll kind of get dressed up a little bit and they'll bring their resume and go around and talk with employers. That's just one way that we do that. But through this area at Barnard called Beyond Barnard, we do lots of advising. You can meet one-on-one with career counselors. They'll look at your resume. They'll help you with cover letters. We have a huge, huge online database that has lots and lots of jobs coming in every day, and students have access to that database to be able to start to look for jobs and apply for jobs. We have a closet that actually has suits in the closet, so we know that many students are going to go for a job interview and they don't have something nice to wear sometimes, and so we actually have suits that you can borrow, right? It's sort of like rent a suit, but we don't charge you for the suit, and so students will do that. And then after you leave here as an alumna, if you ever wanted to come back to have somebody re-look at your resume, or you want to use that database, that we're going to be able to connect with you to help you to continue on. Either if you stay in the same profession, but I'm sure you know people in your lives that have changed professions. And so that may happen at some point. There you might just totally change a career field and you need somebody to talk to. You can come back to Barnard years later and work with somebody, or you wanted to go to graduate school at some point.